There are moments that split your life so completely in half that everything before them becomes a different country, a place you lived in once that no longer has a road back to it. And for me, that moment came on a Tuesday afternoon in October, sitting across from my mother in law at her kitchen table while she folded her hands and looked at me with the expression of a woman who had been rehearsing something for 6 years and had finally decided that the rehearsal was over. My name is Sophia Harland, and I need you to understand something before I tell you what she said. I was not a suspicious person. I was not the kind of woman who looked for problems in places that appeared peaceful. I was someone who had been handed a life that looked exactly like what I had hoped for and had accepted it with both hands and built everything I had around it. Which is exactly why what I'm about to tell you was able to survive for 6 years inside my own home without me ever once seeing it. I had given birth to my daughter Lily on a rainy Wednesday morning in March 6 years earlier, in a delivery room where my mother in law Patricia had been present because my own mother lived 4 hours away and had not made it in time. And I remember that delivery room with the specific clarity that mothers remember the rooms where their children arrived. The particular color of the light, the sound of the monitors, the weight of that baby placed on my chest for the first time, and the feeling that moved through me when I counted her fingers and looked at her face and understood for the first time what it meant to love something more than your own continuation. Patricia had been there for all of it, holding my hand before the epidural, speaking quietly to the nurses, present in the way that I had at the time interpreted as devotion and now understood as something I do not yet have a clean word for. For 6 years, I raised Lily and loved her and watched her grow into a person with opinions and fears and a laugh that filled every room she walked into. And I never questioned anything because she was mine and I was hers. And that was the only truth I had ever needed. And then Patricia called me on that Tuesday and asked me to come alone. Not with my husband David, not with Lily. Alone. And something in her voice had a quality I had never heard in it before. A quality of weight, of something long carried finally being set down. And I drove to her house with a feeling I could not name sitting in my chest the entire way. I sat down across from her, and she looked at me for a long moment before she spoke, and when she finally did, the first words she said were, "Before I tell you what those words were, I need you to subscribe to this channel right now and drop your country in the comments below, because what Patricia said next is something that no amount of preparation could have made me ready to hear." Patricia looked at her hands on the table for a long moment before she raised her eyes to mine, and when she did, I saw something in them that I had never seen there in 6 years of Sunday dinners and birthday parties and school recitals. I saw the specific exhaustion of someone who has spent a very long time holding a shape that does not belong to them and has finally run out of the strength required to maintain it. She said, "Sophia, what I am about to tell you is something I should have told you 6 years ago, and the fact that I did not is something I will spend the rest of my life accounting for." And I sat very still because my body understood before my mind did that the next sentences were going to require every resource I had available just to receive them. She told me that on the morning of Lily's birth, in the hours after I had been moved from the delivery room to the recovery ward, something had happened that she had engineered with a deliberateness that she did not try to minimize or excuse. There had been another baby born that same morning in that same ward, a little girl born to a young woman named Claire, who was alone and frightened and had no family present, a woman whose situation Patricia had become aware of through a nurse she knew personally, a woman whose baby had been placed in the nursery 2 rooms down from where my own daughter was sleeping. Patricia had gone into that nursery. She had looked at both babies, and she had made a decision that she described to me at that kitchen table in a voice so quiet I had to lean forward to catch every word. A decision based on something so specific and so cold that I want you to hear it exactly as she said it to me, which was this. She had switched those babies. because Claire's daughter had a birthmark on her left wrist that matched one that had appeared on David's arm since birth, a mark that Patricia had recognized immediately as the same, and Patricia had decided in that nursery that the baby with that mark was her son's true daughter, and that the universe had made an error that it was her responsibility to correct. She reached across the table and placed a document in front of me, a private DNA test she had commissioned 3 months earlier when her own guilt had finally driven her to confirm what she had believed for 6 years. And the results on that paper told me that the little girl I had been reading bedtime stories to and packing school lunches for and calling mine in every cell of my body was not biologically connected to me, and that somewhere in this city there was a 6-year-old child who was, and that child had been raised for 6 years by a woman named Claire who did not know any more than I had that the daughter she was loving was not the daughter she had delivered. I put the document down on the table, and I looked at Patricia, and I said one word, just one, and that word was why. And what she said in response to that single word is the part of the story I am still not sure I will ever fully make peace with. Patricia said she had done it because she had never believed I was the right woman for her son, and she had decided in that nursery, in the space of 4 minutes, that if she could not remove me from David's life, she could at least ensure that the child binding us together was one that carried her family's blood rather than mine. And I want you to sit with that sentence for a moment, the way I had to sit with it across that kitchen table. The sentence of a woman who had looked at a newborn baby and seen not a child, but a correction, who had walked into a nursery and rearranged 2 families with her bare hands based on a birthmark and a prejudice and 6 years of quiet hatred dressed up as politeness at Sunday dinners. I stood up from that table and I left that house without another word, and I drove to the school and I sat in the parking lot and I watched the doors because pickup was in 20 minutes and I needed to see Lily's face before I made a single decision about anything. And when those doors opened and she came running out with her backpack bouncing and her hair half out of its braid, the way it always was by 3 o'clock, I felt something moved through me that was so enormous and so complicated that I still do not have a word for it, because she was my daughter. She had always been my daughter, and no document on any table in any kitchen was going to change the 6 years of mornings and bedtimes and fevers and firsts that had built what we were to each other. And I knew in that parking lot with complete certainty that whatever came next was not going to be about replacing what I had. It was going to be about expanding it, about finding the little girl named Claire's daughter who was out there somewhere, not knowing that there was a woman in a school parking lot who already loved her simply because of what she was. I called a lawyer that evening and I called a family counselor the following morning, and 3 weeks later, through a process that I will not rush through because it deserves its own telling, I sat in a room with a woman named Claire for the first time, and we looked at each other across that room the way people look at each other when they have been connected by something so enormous and so outside the ordinary bounds of human experience that the usual language of introduction feels completely inadequate. And then we did something that Patricia, in all her calculation, had never once factored into her decision. We decided together, Claire and I, what happened next. Because the one thing Patricia had failed to understand in that nursery 6 years earlier was that the most powerful force in any room is not the person willing to do harm, but the people willing to choose each other anyway. David's mother was arrested 4 months later. David and I did not survive the year. Claire and I are still in each other's lives, and our daughters, both of them, mine and hers, know the full truth now in the age-appropriate and carefully supported way that the counselor helped us find. And Lily still runs out of school with her hair half out of its braid, and she still calls me Mom, and she always will.